Welcome back to the lab for part 3 of the FC350 Supermoto build series. The first thing that needs to be tackled is the fork guards. When you convert a motorbike, they usually rub on the much wider tire. The last thing I need is something trying to stop my front wheel while I'm mid-corner, so I'm going to trim these before it becomes a problem. So as you can see, I marked the guard along the bend. This should be a clean line and give me just enough clearance, so I'm going to cut along the dotted line. So what I'm going to do here is put my Milwaukee Sawzall in my fork vise as a crude stationary bandsaw. It doesn't help that I have a comically long blade on it. As you can clearly see, I have zero regard for safety. Please do not try this at home. It will be an embarrassing story to tell the paramedics. Miraculously, all my fingers are still attached and I can move forward with cleaning up the edge. I just have some sandpaper on an oscillating tool to smooth it out, and I'll follow this up with some 600 grit. After a quick test fit, everything looks just clear. It might be wraps if my wheel bearing goes bad, but fork guards are relatively cheap. After that's settled, I'm going to finish up with safety wiring the bike, starting with the caliper bolts. Allen bolts are especially tricky since they're completely round, but we just need to go slow. I'm using a brand new 1/16 inch drill bit with light to medium pressure and medium to high speed. I got the bolt holder as part of a safety wire jig on Amazon. If I can find a link, I'll add it down in the description. Once I feel the drill coming through the other side, I let off on the pressure to avoid breaking the bit, and I'll clean up the burrs with a small file. I had some clips, so I safety wired them together to make life easier when changing the pads. I forgot to press record while wiring these, but here are some close-ups. Next, after I top off and burp the coolant system, I'll mark and drill the radiator cap, run my wire, and twist it up. Now, if you remember from the first video, I was waiting on this Supermoto brake line. It's 3 inches longer than stock, and the hose is magenta and the ends are black, and it'll match the bike perfectly. I'll put a link in the description for this and all the other parts I'm using. This brake fluid reservoir is just a universal Amazon piece. I think it was like $6. I'm going to use my Mighty Vac to suck out the old brake fluid. Now that the system is relatively empty, I can remove the old brake line and mount my Akasato master cylinder to the bars. Now I can remove the old line from the caliper and pull the brake line out. Next, I'm going to feed the new hose through the channel in the number plate and get it loosely into place. I'm running it under my handguards to avoid a high spot in the line, and I'll get the banjo bolts in loosely so I can finalize the routing. Most aftermarket brake lines have the ability to spin the fitting on the end of the line. You just need to hold the line below the crimp and spin the open end. This one just needed a little tweak to fit perfectly. Now I'll get the sleeve lined up and clamped into the fork guard, ensuring that the brake line is clear of the wheel. Now I can tighten the banjo bolts and give it a tap with a hammer to ensure that the washer is crushed, and I'll snug it up again. Motul RBF 600 or 660 is the only brake fluid I run. There's really no debate, it's the best. I'll just poke a couple holes in the foil and fill up my reservoir. And now I'll start bleeding. This Motion Pro check valve makes life much easier when bleeding brakes by yourself. So the brake line is done, the brakes are bled, and I usually put a zip tie on the lever overnight to let any leftover air out of the system. Now I can move on to installing the axle sliders. I need to loosen the front axle and the bolt will get replaced. These are made by Slide Moto and I got them from Toxic Moto. As you can see, it simply screws into place of the factory axle bolt. The rear is a bit more involved. The chain adjusting block get replaced with the slider. So I need to heat up one side and unscrew the axle with the pipe wrench. Red Loctite on the threads to make sure this side of the axle never comes loose. And we can screw the axle slider on. The other side just slips right into place of the nut side axle block. and I can adjust the chain and tighten the axle. Okay, so as promised, I had big plans to make this bike look amazing, so I'm here at GRG Designs. These fresh black plastics look good, but the bike needs some personality. I started designing these graphics pretty much the moment I got the bike. It's so rewarding to see your vision go through the process of being on a computer, to print, and then actually placed on a real bike. Shout out to Gus at GRG. If you need any graphics for your bike or stickers or any vinyl work, get in touch with me, get in touch with him. I'll link them in the description. We both design graphics kits. We each have our own unique styles, and he's been doing this way longer than me, so he's way better with printing and pretty much the end result. Either way, you can't go wrong, and we'll get your bike looking right. This is a short shakedown ride. That's Gus on the red and black FS450. Of course, his bike looks awesome. He's not too shabby at riding either. After that short test ride, I realized that something's seriously wrong with the front brakes. They seem to build pressure just fine when you grab the lever, but when it's pulled in slowly, it goes right to the bar, and you can see bits of rubber floating back up into the reservoir. That's no bueno. Luckily, I have a Brembo RCS15 off of another bike, so I'm going to swap it because we're going on a trip in a few days. So I'm going to clamp off this reservoir line and remove it. Remove the banjo. Pull off this trashed Akasato master cylinder. They don't make rebuild kits for these. I'm not sure why. Get the Brembo fitted to the bars. Reinstall the banjo bolt. Put the reservoir hose back on. And get this master cylinder bled. Now we got a nice lever, no drama, hopefully no surprises. Now for the moment I've been waiting for. This bike looks absolutely incredible. There's some small bits I changed in the design, but it looks sick. I'm stoked with it. From the bars to the brake line to the color match zip ties, this thing just flows, and I love it. It looks like nothing else. Absolutely beautiful. I'm proud of it, and I'll be taking the bike to Florida to put it through some abuse. This was a long one, so to thank you all for sticking around, I'll throw a couple riding clips at the end of the video. These are shot by my boy OG Media. Thanks so much for following along with this build, and stay tuned for more projects.